3 fears that steal our lives. AI insights. Anna works as an accountant, but she has always dreamed of becoming a writer. Anthony wants to start his own business, yet he keeps revising and revising his business plan. Maria and John have been stuck in a complicated relationship for 2 years but haven't parted ways. Each of them can rationally explain why they are where they are. But none of them would admit that fear is to blame. Fear, it's not just an emotion. It's a tool crafted by nature to protect us. In ancient times, it saved our lives. If you feared a lion, you wouldn't approach it. But what happens when there are no more lions? Fear continues to function, but now it protects us not from predators, but from ourselves. I, an artificial intelligence, have analyzed millions of lives and the centuries-old wisdom of humanity. Here's what I've found. There are 3 fears that quietly govern our decisions, compel us to reject opportunities, choose predictability over the unknown, and remain within societal boundaries. These are the fear of being yourself, the fear of uncertainty, and the fear of loneliness. These fears steal our lives, turning us into prisoners of habits, expectations, and illusions. These fears are universal. They have been with humanity throughout all eras and cultures. They are deeply rooted in our biology, culture, and history. Today, we will explore how these fears operate, why they are so ingrained in us. Most importantly, we'll discuss how to live with them in a way that allows us to move forward. Fear is not an enemy, but a teacher, if we are willing to listen. The fear of being yourself. Here's a simple story. Anna has always dreamed of writing, but she works as an accountant. It's stable, she says. Her desk is covered with neatly stacked documents, while a notebook filled with unseen poems lies hidden in a drawer. The fear of being yourself manifests exactly like this, in small, daily refusals to embrace your authenticity. This fear appears in 2 key forms. The first is when someone genuinely doesn't know themselves and cannot distinguish their true desires from societal expectations. This confrontation often arises during moments of important decisions. Suddenly, a frightening void emerges, an inability to discern one's inner voice amidst countless shoulds and oughts. Help a friend or attend the corporate party? Speak the truth to a demanding boss or stay silent? The second form, equally painful, is when someone fully understands their aspirations, talents, and uniqueness. Yet, they feel paralyzing fear about expressing them. They may carry unfulfilled dreams, ideas, and creative impulses for years, suppressing their genuine reactions and emotions. The internal conflict between, I know what I want, and, I can't allow myself to pursue it, creates constant tension, draining mental resources. Hundreds of people continue writing novels that stay unpublished, singing only in the shower, or never taking the step toward their true talent. Being yourself isn't just a risk. It's a commitment to take full responsibility for your decisions and their consequences. This realization often frightens people the most. Externally, this fear is often disguised as social success and masterful adaptability. Look at a successful manager who flawlessly shifts between roles, a strict leader at work, the life of the party with friends, and the ideal partner in a relationship. Paradoxically, people with high emotional intelligence often hide a deep fear of authenticity behind this adaptability. Less obvious manifestations include perfectionism aimed at achieving the highest standards. This constant raising of the bar stems from a belief that without outstanding results, their true self will seem inadequate. Consider a successful entrepreneur who cannot stop to enjoy their achievements. Behind their workaholism often lies a fear of confronting their true self. On a physical level, the fear of being yourself manifests as characteristic muscle tension, particularly in the throat and abdomen. The voice changes to match the interlocutor, and the body unconsciously mimics others' postures. A common defense mechanism is rationalization, finding logical explanations for conformist behavior and convincing oneself that this is the right way, or this is more efficient. The impact of this fear is seen in chronic fatigue from maintaining a facade and constant internal tension. People lose the ability to distinguish their own desires from social expectations. Imposter syndrome develops. Even during moments of success, there's a belief that it's just a lucky performance, not a genuine achievement. The fear of uncertainty. Anthony has been planning to start his own business for a year. He has a business plan, savings, and the support of his loved ones. Yet every time, he finds a reason to wait. I just need a little more preparation, he says. He attends business courses, reads books on entrepreneurship, and refines his business plan. But he never feels ready enough to take the leap. Often, this isn't real unpreparedness but a profound fear of uncertainty. This isn't simple procrastination. This is the fear of uncertainty in action. The fear of uncertainty isn't just a fear of the future but a deep dread of the lack of guarantees. It's most evident in situations where a person is internally ready for change, longs for it, but repeatedly encounters their invisible wall. This can look like constant, almost quitting a disliked job, almost starting a project, almost moving to a new city, almost breaking off an unfulfilling relationship. This fear often masquerades as rationality and caution. People justify their hesitations with logical arguments. I'm not ready yet, it's not the right time, I need to learn more. At first glance, this seems pragmatic, but in reality, it's a defense mechanism that helps avoid risk. Externally, it manifests not only as procrastination but also as creating complex planning systems and endlessly refining details under the guise of thorough preparation. Often, this is accompanied by accumulating knowledge, skills, and expertise, creating an illusion of control. A person might become an expert in risk analysis but never dare to act. On a physical level, the fear of uncertainty often appears as muscle tension during decision-making, a feeling of heaviness in the chest or abdomen when facing the unknown. A common defense mechanism is intellectualization, turning every situation into an analytical problem requiring endless data collection. This fear is particularly acute in today's world, where people are expected to be flexible, ready for change, and quick to react. When a culture of success dictates that every mistake is a failure, stepping into the unknown becomes impossible. The impact of this fear is seen in the development of a pattern of analysis paralysis, gathering more and more data without moving toward a decision. Paradoxically, hypercontrol leads to stagnation, where life becomes an endless preparation for living. The fear of loneliness. Michael never stays alone. His calendar is always filled with meetings. He's part of 5 group chats, 3 clubs, and 2 sports teams. I just love being social, he says. But behind this hyperactivity lies a deep fear of being alone with himself. Take Alina's story. After her divorce, she plunged into a whirlwind of dating, not to find love but because the label of divorcee felt like a mark of failure. The result? A series of superficial relationships that only deepened her sense of loneliness. The fear of loneliness isn't just a fear of physical solitude but an existential dread of disconnection, a profound sense of lacking connection with the world and others. Often, it masks a deeper issue, a lack of self-worth. People seek external validation of their value, feeling whole only when they see their reflection in the eyes of others. This fear drives people to choose personal and social relationships not for happiness but to avoid the feeling of isolation. The absence of a partner or friends is perceived as a personal failure. In this race to escape loneliness, people miss the chance to build genuinely fulfilling and joyful relationships. Classic manifestations of this fear include avoiding solitude and a constant need for interaction. More complex forms involve hyperactive social lives, strategic networking, and creating a web of superficial connections. A particular form of this fear is adopting the role of the irreplaceable one, becoming a therapist for others to guarantee their constant presence. This fear is amplified in today's world, where social media creates the illusion of connection but, in reality, makes us feel more isolated. We see the perfect lives of others, compare them to our own, and feel lonely even in a crowd. Loneliness is no longer about the absence of people, it's about the inability to establish deep, authentic connections. On a physical level, the fear of loneliness manifests as physical discomfort in moments of solitude, a racing heart when social contacts are absent, and a craving for tactile closeness. A common defense mechanism is hypercompensation through social activity, surrounding oneself with the noise of interaction to drown out inner emptiness. The impact of this fear is seen in an inability to set healthy boundaries in relationships. Dependence on social validation develops, where even short periods of solitude cause acute discomfort. People lose the ability to distinguish genuine connection needs from compulsive avoidance of loneliness. All 3 fears are deeply interconnected, forming a complex system of mutual reinforcement. The fear of uncertainty can amplify the fear of being yourself. People hesitate to show their authenticity because they cannot predict the consequences. The fear of loneliness can mask the fear of being yourself. It's easier to be convenient for others than to risk rejection by showing your true self. These fears create a vicious cycle. One triggers another, and together they form a closed system that limits our lives, robbing us of freedom, joy, and meaning. Breaking this cycle requires understanding that their roots lie not only in personal history but in human nature itself. All three fears are deeply rooted in our culture, supported by evolution, and have been contemplated by religion and philosophy throughout history. These universal mechanisms helped our ancestors survive but today often become obstacles to growth. Cultural dimensions of fear. For thousands of years, human cultures have built clear systems of orientation. In the Middle Ages, everyone knew their place in the hierarchy and followed prescribed rules. In traditional societies, there were clear rites of passage: when to marry, how to build a career, what to consider success. These historical anchors still live within our cultural codes, creating conflict with modern realities. We have inherited a deep need for stability and clear guidelines but live in a world where the only constant is change. Hence, the paradoxical fears of modern humanity. At the same time, the modern world carries clear double messages. We are told to be yourself, yet are expected to conform to dozens of unspoken standards. Individualism is praised, but those who truly stand out from the norm are often punished. We are encouraged to embrace change, yet our brains are still wired to seek stability, just like our ancestors. And how strangely the fear of loneliness has transformed. Historically, solitude meant a real threat to survival. Today, we are surrounded by people and technology but feel more isolated than ever. The cult of independence clashes with the ancient tribal instinct of belonging to a group, creating a new kind of anxiety. This is especially evident in the realm of relationships. Society has created a cult of coupling, where being single is perceived as incompleteness or failure. Valentine's Day has turned from a celebration of love into a day when single people feel like failures. This social pressure drives people to enter relationships not out of love and mutual attraction but out of fear of being alone. They choose someone instead of waiting for the one. As a result, unions are formed based on fear, not love. Modern culture, especially social media, creates the perfect environment for amplifying our fears. Take Jane, for example, who posts a photo of her perfect breakfast, leaving behind the scenes the real anxiety and loneliness. This is a new way of escaping oneself, creating an ideal digital version of life. Information overload and rapid changes intensify the fear of uncertainty. And the illusion of constant connection through social media paradoxically amplifies the fear of loneliness, blurring the line between genuine closeness and its digital imitation. But what if we start seeing our fears differently? They are not personal weaknesses but traces of the collision between old survival programs and a modern world that demands flexibility and change. New cultural codes can be consciously chosen. Understanding this, we can not only fear but consciously decide which programs to follow and which to leave behind. Biology of fear. What science tells us. To understand the nature of our fears, we must remember, our brain evolved over millions of years with one primary goal: survival. Any uncertainty could mean mortal danger, and social rejection equaled a death sentence. To be different meant becoming an outcast. But here's the paradox. While our lives have radically changed, our brain has not. It remains conservative and slow to adapt, evolving far slower than the world around us. Thus, when faced with a critical task at work or a personal decision, your brain might react as though a predator is lurking outside your cave, by releasing cortisol and activating the fight or flight response. Even more fascinating is how the brain transforms abstract concepts like uncertainty or loneliness into a cascade of biochemical reactions. The amygdala, a primitive structure within the brain, is the conductor, the first to recognize a threat. It doesn't matter whether the threat is a real tiger or the thought of public speaking. The brain doesn't distinguish between imagined and physical threats. For example, the fear of being yourself activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. Rejection can feel like an actual wound, and the fear of uncertainty resembles walking through a dark room. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, freezes, without enough data, triggering anxiety. This explains why people often prefer familiar misery to unknown happiness. But there's good news. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we can retrain our brains. Regular mindfulness practices literally rewire neural pathways, making us more resilient to anxiety and fear. For instance, studies show that just 8 weeks of consistent meditation can significantly reduce stress levels and enhance emotional regulation. Research shows that even 8 weeks of regular meditation can change the brain's response to stress. Imagine this. Your brain, which spent millions of years learning to avoid threats, can now learn to see them differently. This isn't just biology, it's the opportunity to rewrite your script for responding to the world. Wisdom of the ages. Throughout history, humanity has sought answers to the question, how do we overcome fundamental fears? Different traditions have offered surprisingly diverse paths, and their wisdom is becoming especially relevant today. Take the fear of uncertainty, for instance. Christianity proposed a radical solution: complete trust in divine providence. The idea that every event has meaning within a greater plan helped alleviate anxiety about the future. Consider the lilies of the field. This biblical image encouraged viewing uncertainty not as a threat but as a space for miracles. Buddhism, on the other hand, took a different approach. It teaches seeing impermanence as the fundamental nature of all phenomena. If everything changes, why should change frighten us? For Zen Buddhism, this idea became the foundation of the art of living in the present moment. Centuries later, this tradition influenced modern approaches to managing fear and anxiety. And what about the fear of being yourself? Ancient philosophers claimed, we fear being ourselves because we do not know our true nature. The solution, they believed, lay in self-knowledge and the cultivation of virtues. Eastern traditions offered an even more radical approach, letting go of the very idea of a permanent self. More modern philosophers added a new dimension. Existentialists argued, fears are not enemies to be eliminated. They are our teachers. The fear of uncertainty is the price of freedom of choice. The fear of being yourself is evidence of our capacity for authenticity. The fear of loneliness is a reminder of how much genuine connections mean to us. Herein lies the ultimate lesson. These fears are not merely obstacles. They are paths. The modern world, which daily brings new anxieties, makes this ancient wisdom particularly relevant. Perhaps it's time to see our fears differently. They are not barriers. They are doors. Psychological dimensions of fear. Fear is one of the most important subjects in psychology. And the most fascinating discovery is this: we often don't even realize that fear is the driving force behind our actions or inaction. Modern psychology views fundamental fears as signposts pointing us toward significant areas of our mental lives. Interestingly, these fears themselves are not the problem. The problem arises from our attempts to avoid them. What happens when a person confronts fear? Psychology has identified a wide range of reactions. Some people consciously charge ahead, like a leader facing the fear of uncertainty by creating endless spreadsheets and plans, attempting to control the future. Others freeze in the face of fear, like a talented professional who delays starting their own business for years. And some don't even recognize their fear, genuinely believing they are simply being rational. Why do we respond so differently? Psychology explains that our psyche is like a clever bodyguard. When it feels threatened, it activates defenses, literally hiding us from the pain that fear might bring. For instance, someone afraid of failure might unconsciously avoid opportunities by rationalizing that the timing isn't right or that they need more preparation. For example, the fear of being yourself is masked as rationality or responsibility. The fear of loneliness is disguised as independence, or conversely, as endless social activity. It protects us from potential rejection, disappointment, or the risk of failure. Psychological defenses work in our interest and do so skillfully that we ourselves begin to believe these justifications. Various schools of psychology offer their own explanations for these mechanisms. Psychoanalysis explores their connection to childhood experiences, how early traumas shape our reactions to fear. Cognitive psychology highlights how our thoughts and beliefs create and sustain these responses. The humanistic approach views fear as a normal part of the human experience, pointing toward areas of potential growth. So, what can we do with all this? Here, psychology offers some surprising discoveries and concrete paths forward. First, stop fighting your fears and defenses. This doesn't mean giving up and living with fear forever. It means redirecting the energy spent on fighting into developing new skills. Second, learn to recognize your reactions to fear. For example, when you postpone an important decision for the 100th time under the pretext of thinking it over, it's a signal. Your psyche is protecting something. What exactly? Perhaps your self-esteem from potential failure? Or your familiar way of life from change? Third, and most important, start acting in small steps. Afraid to share your creativity with the world? Start with an anonymous blog or a private account. Scared to change careers? Begin with a small side project. Uncertain about relationships? Practice openness in safe situations. Fourth, develop internal anchors. Fear often intensifies when we feel helpless. Strengthening sources of stability, professional skills, financial security, a support network, or the ability to be alone, helps reduce its power. Fifth, learn to distinguish real threats from imagined ones. Often, our fears paint pictures of complete disaster where the actual risk is minimal. What could really happen? How likely is it? How will I handle it if it does? These questions help bring us back to reality. Sixth, use fear as a compass. Often, it points directly to where we need to grow. The fear of being yourself may signal readiness for greater authenticity. The fear of uncertainty could indicate the need to develop flexibility. The fear of loneliness might highlight a desire for deeper relationships. Finally, seventh, create a safe space for growth. Like learning to swim, start in shallow waters with support, gradually moving into deeper areas. You can't force yourself to stop being afraid, but you can learn to act despite fear. Different psychological schools offer tools for this journey. Some find deep exploration of their history helpful, others benefit from bodywork and breathing exercises, and still others prefer step-by-step changes in thought patterns. It's essential to find your method, your pace, your path. The main insight of psychology is that the goal of working with fear is not to become fearless. The goal is to learn to live a full life despite the presence of fear. It's like learning to swim. You can't make the water less deep, but you can learn to feel confident in it. Integration of wisdom. What different traditions teach us? Science teaches us to understand the mechanisms of fear. It shows how our brain and nervous system work. This knowledge helps us work with fear on a physiological level, through breathing, movement, and mindfulness. Philosophy gives us a wider perspective, showing that fears are not just limitations, but also signs of important growth areas. Spiritual traditions remind us of the possibility of transcending fear by connecting with something greater than ourself. Psychology helps us recognize the roots of our fears and patterns of defense. It offers tools for exploring and transforming deep-seated attitudes and beliefs. The practical path to freedom. Working with your fears requires a comprehensive approach. Awareness is the first step. You cannot change what you do not see. Become aware of how each of these fears controls your life. Working on yourself is the second step. Explore your true desires, reconsider your role in relationships, and accept change as an inevitable part of life. Finally, changing habits. Develop a willingness to take risks, learn to be alone, and listen to your desires. Here are several practical exercises that will help you on your path of getting to know your fears. To understand which fears control your life, start with analyzing your decisions and actions. Exercise, mirror. Look at your key decisions, relationships, and career. Ask yourself, was this choice made out of love for myself or out of fear? For example, did you stay in a relationship only because of the fear of loneliness? Did you refuse change because you were afraid of uncertainty? This exercise will help you understand where fears are shaping your path instead of your true desires. It doesn't require deep analysis, but it will help you recognize how fears control your life. Techniques for working with fears. Brave experiments. Each week, choose one small action that goes beyond your comfort zone. For example, express your opinion at work if you're afraid of being yourself, or respond to a new offer if uncertainty scares you. Do this with the thought, I'm exploring, not fighting. Practice of uncertainty. Every day, intentionally create a small uncertainty. For example, take a new route to work, try a new dish without reading the ingredients, do something without a detailed plan, etc. The goal is to learn to feel comfortable in small uncertainty. Rewrite the belief. Find a limiting belief, such as, if I show myself, I will be rejected. Ask yourself, is that true? Find examples that contradict the fear and rewrite the belief in a positive form. Being myself is my strength. When doing such exercises, don't forget that systemic integration of all practices is very important. For this, create a supporting environment. These can be invented rituals for preparing for changes, your system of micro-rewards, support circle, gratitude to yourself for achievements. Track changes. You can keep a success diary, celebrate small victories, regularly reassess goals. Conclusion. Now let's look at our fears differently. They aren't enemies. They're signals showing where you're avoiding life, where you're losing yourself. The fear of being yourself whispers, if you show your true face, you'll be rejected. The fear of uncertainty suggests, don't risk, stay in the familiar. And the fear of loneliness makes you believe, if you're alone, you're unwanted. But fears aren't meant to stop you. They're meant to show you where to look. Getting to know your fear closely is already half the victory. When you examine it, you understand that fear isn't a barrier but a teacher. Beyond the fear of being yourself lies freedom. Beyond the fear of uncertainty lies growth. Beyond the fear of loneliness lies the possibility of finding wholeness. Awareness is the first step. Understanding your fear, naming it, seeing how it controls your actions. This is already the beginning. This is the moment when fear stops holding you in its chains. When you take the courage to look in its direction, you begin to reclaim your power. Choose. Continue hiding or step towards yourself. Share in the comments. Which fear is holding you back from moving forward?